They locked my bedroom and turned my life into a cellar while I stood at an airport gate watching history burn in a Roman sunset. Listen closely, because the secret you are about to hear is the kind of small, ordinary cruelty that becomes a cathedral of power if you never answer it. This is not a domestic spat. This is a slow, practiced takeover, the blueprint of quiet corruption that empires and families share. I am telling you a story of one man's exile in his own house, but you must hear it. When I opened that door and found strangers in my living room, the world rearranged its furniture and called it progress. The elderly in those recliners were not merely guests. They were the crowbar at the hinge of a plan. My daughter's eyes were bright with a new allegiance. Her husband wore entitlement like armor. They moved my books, my wife's photograph, the objects that anchored memory. They called it convenience. They called it care. But care is never performed like a takeover. There is a pattern here older than families, the quiet substitution. Replace names on bills. Redirect loyalty with forged signatures, install new locks while respect is miscounted. I traveled to Rome for lessons in empire and came back to live through a smaller, crueler version of the same script. The same methods that toppled kingdoms, subtle shifts, bureaucratic nudges, forged papers, and the calling of decline were used against me. They used institutions I trusted as instruments to make me. This video will show how effective those methods are and why they are underestimated. I will show you the tiny steps that cascade into control, how a changed email, a surprise visitor, a bank charge added to your card becomes the legal scaffolding of theft. You will see how projection and gaslighting become rituals, how kindness can be weaponized, and how a family's indifference mirrors a council's coup. Stay with me. This descent is surgical. I am not just telling you what happened. I am handing you the lens to recognize the pattern and the tools to resist. Men who want to know the truth, who want to keep their names, their houses, and their dignity, will listen. This is where the personal becomes initiation. This is where your attention becomes armor. Prepare to be remade now. When the basement door closed behind me, it wasn't just wood and hinges sealing shut. It was every unspoken word that I had swallowed for years. The cold air smelled of dust and forgotten things, and for the first time, I realized I had become one of them. My daughter's laughter echoed upstairs, mingling with the voices of her in-laws. Each sound was a reminder that the house I built, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, no longer had a place for me. At first I waited for an apology, then I waited for acknowledgement. Neither came. Days turned into a silent ritual of humiliation. Meals left at the top of the stairs, decisions made without me, my belongings reduced to clutter. But humiliation, when endured long enough, transforms into something sharper, something alive. I started to observe. Every gesture, every word, every whispered conversation after dinner. I learned their rhythm, their weak points. My daughter's husband flaunted his control, but I saw the cracks. Her mother-in-law's arrogance was a mask, beneath it lay fear. Slowly I began to plan, not with rage, but with precision. Revenge, I realized, doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience. One night, as rain tapped against the basement window, I found my wife's old journal, the one they had carelessly thrown into a box. Inside was a single line she had once written. "You taught them everything, even how to hurt you." That sentence became my turning point. From that moment, I stopped being their victim. I became their lesson. They thought they'd bought my silence with a futon mattress and the polite clink of a new lock. But they misread me the way a historian misreads a forgery. I began small, letter. Desk to companies, calls that sounded like the voice of a man still in charge. I reclaimed names, account numbers, the language of authority. Each interaction was reclaiming of territory. First, I unpicked their narrative. They had a story ready. Percy is declining. Percy is forgetful. Percy needs assistance. That story required witnesses and paperwork. I found the seams. Utility accounts had been changed with little oversight. A bank accepted an authorized user form with a shaky signature. A title search had been requested and flagged. These were not accidents. They were a campaign of attrition. I started compiling evidence like a general organizes maps. Photographs of displaced possessions, timestamps from emails, copies of forged signatures beside my true hand. I logged calls, recorded dates, noted names. The basement became less a cell and more an archive and legal proof. When they spoke loudly in the kitchen, I listened for patterns and contradictions. Men who think they control a room rarely consider what is recorded outside it. Then I tested the edges. A quiet call to an old friend at the courthouse about eviction protocols. a lunch with a retired attorney who smelled of tobacco and unbothered principles. I learned the line between civil procedure and criminal fraud. Knowledge became leverage. I practiced what I would say until each sentence landed like a hammer. Revenge requires denying the opponent certainty. I could have staged drama to please a crowd. Instead, I aimed to unmake the script they had written. Their legitimacy relied on convenience and assumed consent. I intended to show the cost when assumptions are weaponized against a man who remembers his name. Every small victory was a baton, a returned email, a skeptical clerk, a correction filed. Each correction eroded their scaffolding. They began to stumble, whispering about timing and witnesses. Confidence weakens when paperwork fails to align with narrative. When a man who knows his documents speaks, bureaucracy becomes brittle. This was not about humiliation. It was about restoration. I sought not petty victory, but the return of boundaries and dignity. Choices build legacies, treachery corrodes them. The descent into their own reckoning had begun, and I stood at the lip of it, patient and precise. The day everything shifted was so ordinary that none of them saw it coming. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains the same way it always did. Except this time I wasn't in the basement. I was at the dining table, drinking my coffee from the cup they'd forgotten was mine. Silence wrapped around the house like a fuse before detonation. They entered one by one, my daughter, her husband, his parents, their faces freezing mid-motion when they saw me sitting there, composed, papers spread neatly in front of me. The air thickened. I didn't need to raise my voice. Authority doesn't shout. It simply arrives. I slid the envelope across the table. Inside were copies of every signature, every altered document, every transfer they'd made behind my back. My daughter's color drained. Her husband leaned forward, reading faster now, his arrogance thinning with each page. His mother tried to interject. I didn't let her. "Do you know what forgery carries in this country?" I asked quietly. "Up to 5 years, and you're all on record." Silence. Not a defensive silence, the kind that swallows people whole. I watched them exchange looks, the hierarchy among them collapsing in real time. My daughter's hands trembled. She tried to speak, but guilt makes language stumble. Then came the begging. Her husband promised to fix everything. His parents spoke of misunderstanding, of family, of forgiveness. My daughter, the same woman who had moved me to the basement like old furniture, now reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her, long enough for her to understand that forgiveness would never mean forgetfulness. I stood, folded the papers, and said the only thing that mattered. You wanted this house to be yours. Now you'll live in it knowing who truly owns it. By evening they were gone. The locks were changed again, this time by my order. I walked through each room, reclaiming not just space but breath. The scent of old wood and dust no longer smelled like exile. It smelled like justice. Some revenge stories end in rage. Mine ended in silence, the kind that follows when order returns and everyone finally knows their place. The house is quiet now, not the uneasy silence of suppression, but the peace that follows a storm finally spent. Every room breathes again. My steps no longer echo off concrete walls, they land on hardwood floors that remember me. The basement door stays open. A reminder, not a prison. I've thought often about that day, about the trembling in my daughter's voice, the shame that replaced her pride. People imagine revenge as fire, quick, furious, consuming. But real revenge is colder. It's deliberate. It's the moment you turn pain into discipline and let justice, not anger, speak for you. In the weeks that followed, she tried to call. I answered once. She said she was sorry, that she never meant for things to go that far. I told her something simple. Intentions don't erase consequences. Then I hung up. It wasn't cruelty. It was closure. Some lessons require distance. Now, when I sit by the window at dusk, the same sun that used to fall on the basement steps warms my face again. I've learned that dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. That forgiveness, when it comes, must first pass through the fire of accountability. People will tell you to let things go, to be the bigger person. But sometimes being the bigger person means standing tall enough for others to see their reflection in what they tried to bury. So if you ever find yourself pushed aside, silenced, or forgotten, don't rush to anger. Wait, watch, learn, then act, because the sweetest revenge isn't in making them hurt. It's in making them understand what they lost when they underestimated you. And that is where my story ends, not in the basement, but in the light above it. Time has a way of sanding down even the sharpest memories, but some moments refuse to fade. Months have passed since that confrontation. And yet, sometimes when I pass by the basement door, I can still hear the echo of my own restraint, the voice that chose patience over fury. They say victory tastes sweetest in silence. I learned it's true. The neighbors never knew the full story, they only saw a family that parted ways. My daughter and her husband sold their car to pay for the debts they created trying to outsmart me. Her in-laws moved back to their old town, where whispers now follow them like shadows. I didn't have to destroy them. The truth did that for me. As for me, I didn't rebuild out of bitterness. I rebuilt because survival demands transformation. I planted a small garden out back, tomatoes, mint, and jasmine. Every morning when I water them, I remember the lesson those months taught me. Power doesn't come from control, it comes from boundaries, the kind that say, this is my space, this is my worth, this is my name. I've kept one thing from that old basement, my wife's journal. It sits on the mantel now, open to that same line. You taught them everything, even how to hurt you. But beneath it, I've written my own answer, and I taught them what it costs. The past no longer lives here, only reminders do, that betrayal can build resolve, that silence can become strategy, and that justice, when delivered with precision, doesn't echo, it endures. So if you ever find yourself in your own basement, pushed down, overlooked, or underestimated, remember this: the world may strip you of comfort, but never of control. Because the moment you stop begging for space and start reclaiming it, you stop being the victim of someone's story and become the author of your own. The camera would. Find me in the doorway, light spilling in from the window, not dramatic, just real. The kind of light that touches old wood and forgives it. You'd see the years in my hands, the calm in my eyes, and maybe you'd understand that this isn't just one man's revenge. It's a warning, a confession, and a promise all at once. I'd look straight into the lens and speak, not like a victim, not like a hero, but like someone who has finally learned the weight of silence. They thought moving me to the basement would make me smaller, but when they buried me under their pride, I grew roots, and roots don't beg, they break concrete. The music would rise, low and steady, not triumph, but truth. You'd hear my footsteps echo through the hall, through rooms that once felt stolen. Every frame would remind you that revenge isn't chaos, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop waiting for them to apologize and start writing your own ending. People say blood is thicker than water, I'd continue, voice steady. But respect is thicker than both, and once it's gone, nothing holds a family together. Outside, the garden I planted would sway in the wind, a quiet symbol of rebirth. No grand speeches, no tears, just a man who turned pain into peace. If they ever remember me, I'd say, walking toward the door, I hope they remember not the anger, but the lesson, that a house without respect is just walls, and a father without dignity is no father at all. The screen would fade to black. A final title would appear. My daughter chose her in-laws over me. Big mistake. And beneath it, one last line. Some revenge stories don't end in fire, they end in freedom.